Well, welcome to the 1-9 Podcast, a ministry of the 1-9 Alliance. The 1-9 Alliance exists to help God's people rightly value, interpret, and apply the Word of God. You can find out more information about the 1-9 at 19alliance.org. That's all spelled out, 19alliance.org. I'm Jeremy Muncie, and I'm with my co-host Andrew Balich, and today we are blessed to have two guests on the show, two pastor brothers that are serving in the same district as us, that have just been a real blessing to us over the years. Wade McGee and Nathan McKeen. And we're going to be discussing something that's near and dear to them, and that's pastoring in a small town, pastoring and maybe in more of like a rural type setting. And so some questions that we want to cover today are just, what are some of the joys of pastoring in a small town? What are some of the good things about pastoring in a smaller community? And then what are maybe some of the challenges? Then we want to talk about just pastoral ministry in general. Like what are some of the pervasive things that no matter where you're pastoring at, these things apply. And in what ways is pastoring in a rural setting no different than anywhere else kind of question. And then we'll get some wisdom from them. What have they learned in pastoral ministry? If they could go back and talk to their younger self, what would they say? So hopefully get to cover those questions. We'll see where things go, but excited to have you guys on the show. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you.
Yeah, welcome to both of you. And we would like to just start by allowing you just to tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about you, and then a little bit about the churches that you pastor as well. So you guys don't have to fight over it. We'll start with Nathan. How about that? You kick us off, and then we'll hear from Wade as well.
That sounds good. Well, I'm Nathan, and I'm pastoring Flushing Alliance Church. Married to my wife Ginny for almost 13 years. We've
Nice.
got two boys. Reese just turned 3 last month. He's our toddler, and actually our second born, Ridley Cooper, was born just 3 weeks ago today. So we've got a new one.
Yes, I saw a picture.
Yeah, excited
what a
about
cute
that.
Little guy. Yeah,
and it's fun to already watch the interaction, the sibling rivalry that's beginning.
Oh yeah,
really early. But I'm pastoring Flushing. It's the church I grew up in. So Jeremy, I think that's something I've got in common with you brothers. I'm actually the church that I grew up in.
Andrew as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay,
we grew up together. Believe it or not.
No idea. Yeah, I don't think I ever heard that story.
Yeah.
So it's been almost 35 years that I've been in this congregation, going on 35 years, and it's not something I would have imagined doing. But now that I am doing, I can't really imagine doing anything else.
That's cool. Yeah.
Flushing's an older church, at least in the Alliance. We were around back in 1907. So a lot of generational families, a really great history, but God's been adding a lot of new faces and new families recently. And,
no charter members are still there, right? That'd be some kind of record.
So. I don't think so. Not at this point. We've got a population in Flushing of just over 800. So small town. We are southeast Ohio. We're in Belmont County, pretty close to the West Virginia Panhandle. So actually, a lot of our people are driving, sometimes even a half hour more to get to us. Some of the people that have been coming recently. So I minister to a lot of people in town, but then we've also got a lot of folks that are traveling.
That's awesome.
That's great. What about you, Wade?
So my name is Wade McGee. I'm at Living Water Church, which is in Philippi, West Virginia. Spelled the same as Philippi in the Bible, but we pronounce it as Philippi in West Virginia.
Hey, I was in Kentucky for a number of years, and there's Versailles, not Versailles. Yes. Don't say it. Yeah, sort of. I get it. Yeah.
Yes. And there's a town in southern West Virginia that is spelled hurricane, but pronounced hurricane, if you're ever in that area. So, So I'm married to my wife, Jamie. We've been married 30 years next month. And,
praise the Lord.
Came to know the Lord just about 30 years ago as well. We have 2 adult children. Our son, Wes, is 25, and our daughter, Jordan, is 23. And so we are happily empty nesters. And I've been here at Living Water Church in some capacity for almost 10 years, first as a member, then an elder, then as an associate pastor when Mike McAdam was here. I know Jeremy knows Mike. And Mike left in 2019. And so I stepped into what the Alliance calls senior pastor just over 5 years ago. I've been off and on in various ministry roles for about 20 years now.
Okay.
Philippi, West Virginia is just a small rural West Virginia town. Really, about all we have going for us is coal, and we have a population of around 2,000, a little less in the town, and the county, Barber County, that we're in is about 16,000 people. One of the poorest counties and one of the poorest states in the union. So that's where we are.
Yeah. I have roots in West Virginia. My dad is from McDowell County, which I think might be the poorest county in
Yep.
the United States. But yeah, same. Coal is almost everything for a lot of those communities. But man, it's beautiful there, brother. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And so
It is. Yeah, that's our claim to fame, and the way we try to make a living is on tourism. And so
yeah,
we do have that going for us.
amen. My dad calls it God's country, but I remind him, everything's the Lord's, Dad. You know that, right?
Almost heaven. Almost heaven used to be
Almost
our,
heaven. Yeah.
Yep.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, let's move on to some of our questions here. Let's talk about that. You're in that small town setting, both of you. What are some of the good things? Like, what are some of the blessings about being in a small community like that and serving there? Either one of you can go.
So I would say, one of and some of this is probably an overlap at small community and small church. So it might be applicable to a house church in Columbus as well. I don't know. But I think one of the joys, one of the benefits is what I would call network, in that being in a small community, you may have, in our case, in our church, we have one of the local doctors. So for a lot of people in our church, they go to church with their family doctor.
Yeah.
That can be good or bad.
Especially when you change doctors.
Same thing with teachers. So some of the students, they're attending church with their teachers in the public school, or the gentleman that's running for the Board of Education. So just those kind of things that they may be in a larger church, in a larger community. I don't know, but it's very significant here that it's just part of that
more
network.
Pronounced.
It is.
Yeah,
yes.
The odds of going to a church with your teacher is way smaller in a city of 2 million than a city of 2,000. That's
So I think
cool.
that's one of the joys, one of the benefits. Another one that I think is possible, Jeremy, but we've not really attained it, is really more of an emphasis on kingdom than on Living Water Church, because we're a bedroom community. So most of the people that work outside the home do not work in our county. They drive anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes to an hour to work. So they work somewhere else. So chances are those people that they work with are probably not going to drive to Philippi to be part of a local church. So I think about David Lane's, where you live, work, and play. Well, for us, most people don't work here. Some do, but it's very few. So there's a possibility then to have that benefit of not so much focused on growing Living Water Church, although that would be great, but a focus more on the kingdom of taking Christ into the workplace somewhere else. So I think that could be a benefit. We've kind of dabbled in that, but haven't made a lot of progress with it at this point.
We'll pray you do. Yeah.
And I'd echo a lot of those same thoughts. Something else that we've had the opportunity to do in Flushing is work with some of the other smaller churches that are in our community. We're at a place where, we used to have a church on every corner. The buildings are still there for the most part, but a lot of the congregations have shrunk so significantly. But there's so much room to partner with them. And we often talk about, there's one church in Flushing. There's a lot of congregations in Flushing. Ours is the Alliance Church in Flushing, but there's really one church. There's one people of God there, and looking for those opportunities to work together. And something else that comes along with rural ministry that I appreciate is that everybody knows you, and you kind of get to know everybody. And
right.
That could kind of be a two-edged sword, but I think the positive side of that is you sort of get endeared to your community, and not just the assembly of saints that you're gathering with on Sundays, but everybody in the community gets to know you as pastor, even if you are not their pastor, even if a lot of times they're not believers.
Yeah.
they come to know you as pastor. And in a small town, especially, that's not a bad thing. That's rarely a negative. Pastor is something that comes, you're a trusted member of the community. You've got a lot of respect. There's a lot of positivity that's attached to it. And so because of that, you also get welcomed in to a lot of things, sometimes more than you want to. Just recently, I was drafted to be the president of a concerned citizens group, and it's just bringing back a fireworks show to our community. They asked me, I want to see it too. And you think about sort of the opportunities that can come along with that to build relationships with people. And so it's not a hard sell usually when the community wants your involvement to dive in. There's a lot of opportunities like that.
Yeah. That's great, guys.
Awesome.
What about some challenges, though? I mean, that was a great articulation of some of the blessings and the benefits of that setting. But what are some challenges or difficulties in that kind of rural setting? Maybe start with you, Nathan.
Maybe I could spin kind of the joy, maybe the downside, because I think that there's a challenge that comes with what I just said. You think of rural ministry a lot of times being anonymity. You're sort of unknown, flying under the radar. But like I said, everybody in your context knows you, everybody. And so sometimes that can make it challenging just to walk down the street or go to the store, because you never know if you're going to end up porch sitting with somebody, you're going to get sucked into an adventure somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's good. We had a missionary who was visiting with us a couple of years ago, Alan Kropp from Japan. It's something that he told me, and it has stuck with me. I've probably preached it at this point, I don't know how many times. But he said, stop looking at interactions in your day as interruptions. Anytime someone just comes into your life, he said, start looking at those as divine appointments. God is sovereign. He's bringing people into your journey. He's bringing people into your context. And if you start looking at those things as divine appointments, you'd be surprised what God is actually doing if you'll lean into it.
Yeah.
And so it's a challenge sometimes because you can't really assign a time budget to things as much as you want to. And it's very frequent that I get to the end of my week and I'm still trying to finish my sermon and get things done because there are just so many constant, I don't want to call them interruptions. I want to call them divine appointments, but I love it, but it's a challenge. It's a hard thing.
No, that's good. I can relate. We're in a little bit of a bigger community. What is Mansfield now? Like 70,000 or something like that?
Yeah, roughly.
But man, I can't tell you how many times I go to the store and I see somebody from church, or I also coach high school football, or I see like a football player and their family or something. It's amazing. And my wife will be like, well, she just knows, I'll get home late and she'll be like, yeah, who would you run into, this time? It's a blessing.
Yeah. So at 70,000, Jeremy, you're larger than the largest city in the state of West Virginia. Just so you know. So, you know what? I want to put a disclaimer on what I'm going to say, because this may be unique to West Virginia, and I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if this the challenge, because there's a culture, there's an Appalachian culture that I was born and raised in. I live in the town where I grew up, so I guess maybe that gives me the ability to speak more openly about it. But I think probably one of the biggest challenges that we face, Jeremy, you're a football coach, so I call it the stiff arm. And in rural West Virginia, there is a distance that people like to keep. There's a distrust. I talked to a gentleman actually last week and who was fairly new to our area, and he called it tribalism. So even within our county, if you're from somewhere else, then you're different, and there's a distance, there's a coldness.
Sure.
And so that is hard to overcome. Even if you're from here, there's still people in West Virginia like to be left alone. And there are people that move to West Virginia for that same reason. We moved here so that we are left alone. Now, that's not everyone. Don't hear me wrong, but that is a lot of the culture in rural West Virginia. And I use this. I'll give you one actual example and one anecdote. So, anecdotally, if my truck gets stuck in a ditch on my back road where I live, I will definitely have neighbors that will stop and say, "Hey, let me run home and get the tractor and I'll pull you out," because they'll do that. That same neighbor wouldn't dream of coming to my house to share a meal. And they would not dream of having me come to their house to share a meal. So like that, again, that idea of where you live, work, and play.
Yeah.
Living in rural West Virginia is not really open. It's not conducive. It's not Mayberry by any means. And the actual
Sure.
story we have, so there's a person that I actually grew up with, so years upon years, and this person, someone that they work with attends our church. And so they made that connection. Oh, you go to this church, Wade McGee's the pastor, and this person said, oh yeah, we're neighbors, and we're good neighbors. We leave each other alone. And so that's the idea, and it really is a challenge. So
Yeah.
where we work is not really in our area. Where we live it's really hard for things like old school door-to-door evangelism. I mean, they may not even open the door. So
Sure.
I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges. And again, I want to be very clear that may be more unique to the culture of Appalachia and West Virginia than it is to, I don't know if that's the case in small town
Most
Ohio
small
or
towns.
Indiana. But I
Yeah.
think that's probably our biggest challenge.
Yeah. So just a follow-up question to that, this isn't something that, we even discussed asking, but so what do you do to build bridges with people relationally? If hospitality isn't something that is the norm, do you just invite them over to your place 1,000 times until they finally say yes, or do you have other ways that you foster that?
Really, the only thing, and there are some that are probably better at this than I am, that are more persistent to try to build those relationships. Most of the relationships that get built are in some form in a workplace. Because
Gotcha.
there is, when working side by side with someone, there's a relationship that will develop there quicker than anywhere else.
That
And
makes sense.
that's really that's really the best that we have to offer, I
Yeah.
guess.
So missional living in the workplace is huge. That's a drum probably you have to beat all the time at your local congregation. I think
It is.
that's good. That's really helpful. I know a lot of people that are listening right now are pastoring in rural areas, and maybe you're in an area like that, and maybe that's something that can help you. But yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I've been praying for years for God to raise up a native of McDowell County to help with some church planting there in McDowell County, where my dad is from, because outsiders oftentimes don't have that same trust that that is needed.
Yep.
Yeah. So, in what ways though, so those are the ways maybe that it's unique to pastor in a rural setting. In what ways is pastoring though, where you're at, no different than pastoring anywhere else? What are some similarities?
I think it's the same. It's people. It's seeking to love people and serve people. It's people in difficult. The difficulties may be different here as far as poverty and things like that, but it's still people dealing with the struggles of life. The gospel is the answer. Seeing people grow, seeing people come to faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, all those things, that whether there's 70,000 in Mansfield or 2,000 in Philippi,
Right.
yeah, those same joys are there, same struggles are there in a lot of ways.
And the gospel's the answer no matter where you're at, even in Appalachia, right, baby?
Amen.
Love it. What would you say here, Nate? Anything to add to that?
I would say the spiritual DNA is always the same. The wisdom that we have to operate with is always the same. It's the same Bible. It's the same blueprint. I love that you can go to the New Testament, and no matter what your context is, you can find out what a church should look like, what a pastor should look like. And the other thing that we all have in common, regardless if we're coming from somewhere big or small, is that we're all challenged to think bigger, and we're looking to the ends of the earth in the Great Commission. And so we've got to find a way to tackle that together, whether we're starting in a rural place or a city. In that, I think there's a lot of similarity, and and you probably deal with a lot of the same people, even if they don't have the same accent or maybe the same exact
same
problem.
job or whatever. They got the same personality. My pastor growing up used to always say, if you have a person in one church that's, a real pain, don't think that moving to another church will solve that problem, because what you'll do is you move there, and that same person will be there. They'll just have a different face and a different name. And it's true.
I've heard that story before too.
I'm sure. Yeah,
They
I'm sure he
they
rips it off somebody.
they have relatives that will be waiting on you when you get to the next place.
Yeah.
Almost like they plan it. Huh?
Yeah.
And you'll still, you'll still be there. You know what I mean? That's the thing. It's like wherever we go, our own sinful nature and
Yeah, that same pastor growing up would say, if you ever find a perfect church, don't go there because you'll mess it up. You know.
Oh, love it.
So
He's
true.
still pastoring today.
We preach to them once a week, but we got to preach to ourselves all week long. So
That's right.
Amen, man.
I'm the biggest problem in my congregation. It's me, my sin nature.
That is so true.
Amen.
The word has to do its work in our heart.
Yeah, my biggest problem is Jeremy, but that's
I'm a huge issue in our church.
So this is always a fun question, just kind of what you've learned over the years. You know, if you could go back, Wade and Nate, you know, to your early days of ministry, what would you tell yourself as a word of wisdom or advice or recommendation? What would you say?
Wade's got to think a little bit more than me because I only got to time travel about 6 years. So I've only
okay.
6 years.
So maybe you're telling yourself this right now as we speak.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah.
There you go.
There's a wiser answer to this that comes from an older me. But what I would say so far looking back and just in the context that I've been in, and something that I think is also another challenge of rural ministry is a lot of times, and this is certainly the case with me, I'm serving in a single pastorate church. We don't have a lot of extra resources. We don't have a whole lot of people that are with me through the week. I'm solo most of the time. Sometimes I've got my secretary with me. But I got to wear a lot more hats than can ever look attractive on one person, and they just stack and stack. You get busy doing a lot of things. And if I could go back and kind of challenge old me 6 years ago, I would share with him something that I was even told back then, but I don't think I really it clicked. And one of my elders would often say, even a good thing can become a bad thing if it gets in the way of the best thing. And you will not have a hard time loading up your schedule, finding all kinds of good things that you can commit to. But I would say to myself, make sure that whatever you're doing is what God is assigning to you and not something that just you can do because you're willing and because you want to be helpful. But make sure it's what God has assigned to you. And I think that's probably the key to longevity in ministry when you're in that situation, especially as a single staff pastor. And I think one of the ways I would say, because I think that's something that maybe I even kind of knew back then, but I would say where I probably didn't implement it as well, and something very practical that I would tell myself to do earlier is appreciate the office of deacon more. I started into pastoral ministry with a very big idea of pastoral plurality and leaning on my elders and kind of relying on them for a lot of the spiritual support. But we had kind of an underdeveloped office of deacon in our church. And I think that's the case in a lot of churches. And they're so helpful. God was wise in the spirit in establishing that office. And I think working to make sure that your deacons are deployed, that they're trained men, that they're should be in that office and they're doing what they need to be doing. That's going to free you up and your fellow elders up to pastor better. And so that's probably the most practical thing I would tell myself is get a handle on that early.
That's a great word.
That's good.
That is a great word. Are you, Wade?
I guess I would say two things. One, I would probably tell myself to calm down. I think my cage stage has extended far longer than it probably should have. But I think the other thing I would tell me, and this may be unique, or maybe it will help some other guys out there. For most of the 20 or so years that I've been in ministry, I've been bivocational in some sort, either a full-time job or a part-time job, various industries. Mm-hmm. And I still struggle with this. I would tell myself to remember that church ministry is not the same as a business. And so it's most of what we do as pastor elders. The Lord has to move people. There's no rolling out the new initiative and everybody get on board because this is your job and it's what you're paid to do. It just doesn't work that way. Yeah. And so I would tell myself that because that's one that I still struggle with to this day is this is not a business where a manager or an owner says, here's what we're going to do. And this is your job and you do it. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. More of a family, more of a body. And Yeah, what's crazy is, most of our workers, they aren't paid. So it's
Right.
Yeah, it's
in a normal
volunteer.
job,
Yeah.
you can fire people that don't do a good job. You know what I mean? Because they're getting paid. But in the local church, you have to learn to endure and be patient and train, and it's very much similar to a family.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about, so I guess one more question. We've covered a lot of ground, but I kind of like to ask an open-ended question if there's time. Is there anything that, we didn't hit on today, either in regards to this conversation or just anything church related or ministry related, that you'd like for us to communicate to our listeners, or that you'd like to communicate?
Yeah, I would say don't allow yourself to be isolated. And I think in a small town setting, in a rural setting, maybe that's even easier than in a city.
Hmm.
Not allow yourself to be isolated in pastoral ministry. You need to find people that not only that can encourage you, other pastors, and maybe they're not other pastors even in your denomination, but they're other pastors that still share a lot of the same experiences that you do. But find those men and connect with them, build those relationships, not just for your sake and for your encouragement. You'll need it, but also because they need it too. And a lot of those guys don't have,
That's a great point.
less encouragement. Maybe some of those guys don't even have the networking that we do. There's a lot of guys in the Alliance that even if we're an hour's drive away, I can call and have a phone conversation with, or get together for lunch if we schedule it right. But some of these other guys, maybe they got nothing or next to nothing. And so maybe
Right.
and that's another way that you can minister even beyond your local church capacity and encourage somebody else. I'd encourage everybody to do that.
That is a great word.
That's great. I know one of the things that in seminary was recommended to me, and it's been a blessing because I actually took the advice, was to have a pastor friend that's outside of your local church, because that will protect your family and your friend, people, somebody you can talk shop with. Is not exactly what you were saying, Nathan, but it's one of those added benefits. You can talk about church without it being so close to home, with the people that you're ministering to and care for. So yeah, I think that's awesome. What about you, Wade?
I think the only thing I would say, and maybe this is just to clarify, I don't want to leave folks with the wrong idea about people in West Virginia with the stiff arm challenge. There are some great people in rural West Virginia, and like I said, they'll, especially if you need help with something, they are there. And I've had people tell me that about the community so many times in so many different ways. And also, once that barrier is overcome, they can be some really, really great friends, strong relationships within the church and outside the church. So just to clarify that we're not all as bad as I might make us sound when I give that challenge.
We get it. Some people are listening to this podcast and they were thinking to themselves, I'm moving to West Virginia.
I was planning on it as he was talking. I was thinking,
I want to be left alone, so I'm going to move to West Virginia. No, I think I think people get that. I think it's in fact, to go back to that, I think that's a growing attitude and spirit in our nation right now. There's a lot less community type things happening than were happening before COVID and before our generation. You look back at our parents and our grandparents' generation, and people, sitting on the front porch, and everybody knew everybody's business, and it was just, people are a lot more isolated now, and so it's funny, Nathan's word of advice at the end there had to do with isolation, and it's funny that you mentioned one of the difficulties is that people isolate themselves, and I think that's something that we have to pray against. That's something that we have to strive to teach against in a biblical way. What does it look like to live in community? What does it look like? Yeah. And so I think that those are all good words, and I'm glad that that the Lord impressed those things on you guys to share. That's good. It's helpful.
It's the first negative thing that God ever says in His Word. He's creating.
Yes.
This is good. This is good. The first negative thing is not good for man to be alone.
Right. Yeah. Well said.
It isn't good. We weren't made to be that way. I remember there was a student when I was in seminary that was preaching, and I don't remember what he preached on, but I remember he used an illustration of like charcoal. You have those charcoal little briquettes or whatever they're called. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but little chunks of charcoal, and when you are cooking with charcoal, that they feed off of each other. You know what I mean? That you lump them all together and pile them all up so they feed off of each other. And if one falls off on its own, it goes out real quick. But if they're all together, they stay hot. So, yeah, no, that's good stuff, brothers. Really appreciate you joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'm glad you were
for sure.
able. I really appreciate those who are listening. I'm guessing most of the people listening to this can at least relate to what's being said, because as far as I understand, most of our churches are in smaller communities. And so hopefully this has been a blessing to you. If you've benefited, please share this resource with your friends, post it on social media or do something like that. Help us spread the word about the 1-9. And until next time, God bless, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, brothers.
We'll see you, fellas. God bless you
Thank you.
guys.
You too.